Good morning, grade 8s. Nearly time to come back to school, and I hope that you're as excited about it as I am. Okay, we're starting a new section under sexual reproduction, and the section that we're going to start now is a section on sexually transmitted infections. First of all, let's just talk about a very important rule in life sciences. Okay, so this rule goes: you may not just make up your own abbreviations or use your own abbreviations. There are certain scientifically acceptable abbreviations, and I will always tell you what is an acceptable abbreviation and what isn't. So here we're going on to sexually transmitted infections, and an accepted scientific abbreviation is STIs, with a little s at the end because it is plural. Okay, and the rule goes: when you first write this in a test or assessment or an exam or whatever, you first of all have to write the entire term. So you would write sexually transmitted infections, in brackets, STIs, and then after that, for the rest of that assessment, not for the rest of your life, you may use the abbreviation STI or STIs. Right. So, sexually transmitted infections used to be known as sexually transmitted diseases, abbreviated as STDs. These terms have very slightly different meanings. You don't have to know them, but a purist would use them correctly in the correct context. You don't have to know that. I'm happy for you to use either, although currently more people use the term STIs. Many years ago, about 50 or 60 years ago, STIs used to be called venereal diseases, VD. Okay. All right, first of all, before we go any further, the video that I got uploaded for you, on contraceptives, it is always very difficult to find suitable videos. So what I do is I look through many videos and look for one that is not too simple, not too difficult, covers the work that you do, etc., etc. But the one on contraceptives has included some personal pronouns. Please just accept the fact that it was not intended to have personal pronouns. That means you. So if it says something like, you must use a condom, I don't mean you must use a condom. It's not an instruction, and just take it from whence it comes and accept it. Okay, so I'm presuming that it's going to be a long time before it would be appropriate for you. Okay. So sexually transmitted infections, or STIs, are infections that can be caught or passed on when an uninfected person has unprotected sex or close sexual contact with another person who already has an STI. Now, I must explain about unprotected sex. It is a term that is used frequently. And here, in the context of STIs, it means using, so protected sex would be sexual intercourse using a male or a female condom, which is specifically a barrier that protects against STIs. It does also protect against pregnancy. We're not concerned about pregnancy in this particular context. We're simply talking about STIs. So, for example, an IUD will protect against pregnancy, but it definitely doesn't protect against STIs. So in this context, protected means using a male or female condom. All right, so STIs then, the transferring of STIs can include vaginal or anal or oral sex. And And some STIs can be passed on by just skin-to-skin contact. Okay, so to prevent infection with an STI or reducing the chances of getting an STI. So using a male or female condom, that you can remember from the previous section we did, a male condom is slightly more effective than a female condom, both for preventing pregnancy and preventing STI transmission. So using a condom, male or female, for all types of sexual contact is the best way to avoid STIs, including infection with HIV. So remember that HIV is one of the STIs, although it's not always transmitted by sexual intercourse. The second really important way of preventing infection is reducing the number of sexual partners. Doesn't mean the number of times a couple has sex or a person has sex in total, but depending on reducing the number of different partners used. And this decreases the chances of becoming infected. There are certain vaccines which can prevent certain STIs, one of which works against HPV, which is an STI which causes genital warts, and I'll discuss that in more detail later on, I think. Right, and then very important, not mixing alcohol, drugs, and sex also decreases the chances of becoming infected, as it reduces the chances of reckless behavior. So the causes of STIs, there are many different types of STIs, caused by a number of different organisms, such as bacteria or fungi, but there are also other little organisms as well that cause STIs, such as viruses. So the first one we're going to talk about is one that is caused by a virus. And this one is human papillomavirus, abbreviated as HPV. Remember the rule? First write the entire thing out, then you're allowed to write the abbreviation in brackets, and after that you can use the abbreviation. So HPV stands for human papillomavirus. Now there are lots of, and I have to emphasize this, lots of different strains of human papillomavirus, and I'm sure that I'll discuss this in the next slide. And it is transmitted by skin-to-skin or sexual contact, depending on the particular strain being investigated at that time. And it is the most common sexually transmitted infection. It's usually very harmless. It normally goes away by itself. Person's immune system normally gets rid of it, just like when a person gets a cold, within about a week or so, the immune system has overcome the cold and the person gets better. Same thing with HPV, and normally people don't even realize they've been infected with HPV. And there are other ways of getting it, like the skin-to-skin contact, not necessarily sexual contact. So HPV is usually harmless and goes away by itself, but some types can lead to genital warts or some types of cancer, and I'll talk about that. So this is just a picture of some warts caused by HPV. So first of all, on your little piece of paper, how wide is the actual virus across its widest point? So this is an electron micrograph of human papillomavirus times, in other words, at a magnification of 300,000 times. And my question is, how wide is the actual virus, the real thing, the real object, across its widest point? Now this is a sphere, and therefore it doesn't matter where you measure the diameter, it should actually work. So I want you to quickly think. You can't measure this because it's on my screen, it's not on a piece of paper for you to measure, although you can measure it across on your screen. And remember that the way that you're going to do this is, the formula is Remember, the magic triangle is I over MO. And so if you want to know O, the actual object, then the formula that you're going to use is O equals I divided by M. So I is the diameter in the image. M is the magnification you've got down here. So the measured diameter of the image, so it was measured from there to there, was 16 millimeters. I gave you the magnification down here at 300,000 times. And the formula then, and you must write the formula. Object size equals image size divided by magnification. So 16 millimeters divided by 300,000. You must include the units of measurement all the way through your calculations in life sciences. I know science doesn't. Life sciences insists that you do, for very, very good reasons. And then this is the figure that you get in millimeters if you calculate that out. Now, it wouldn't have been wrong to convert this to nanometers first, but it's possibly just easier to work like this. You get an answer like that, and you have to convert it to sensible units of measurement. And in this case, a sensible unit would be nanometers. So remember that 1 millimeter equals 1 million nanometers. So you divide that figure by 1 million. And the answer is 53,3 nanometers. Okay, so this would probably be in a test or exam for about 5 or 6 marks. I would need to know that you'd measured correctly. Formula, that you put in the correct measurements and you have the correct unit of measurement included here. You would lose a mark if you didn't. That you get a unit, that you get an answer and you've included units, and that you've converted it to a sensible unit of measurement. Okay, so it would be about 5 or 6 marks. So there are about 100 or more different strains of human papillomavirus, most of which are not STIs. Some types of HPV infection cause warts. Some can cause genital warts, in other words, on the reproductive organs. And some can cause various types of cancer. And this is the issue. The issue is that they can cause cancer. So here are some pictures of models constructed from images seen at very high magnifications under electron microscopes. And you can see this is HPV 6, 11, 16, and 18. Okay. So most HPV infections don't lead to cancer, but some types of genital HPV can cause cancer. They can cause cancer of the mouth, or the lips, or the throat, or they can cause cervical cancer, or penile cancer, or rectal cancer. And this just depends, obviously, on the type of sexual intercourse done. So if a person never has oral sex, then they wouldn't get oral cancer from HPV. They could get oral cancer from other reasons, other causes, but not from HPV. Okay, so you get what I'm saying there. I told you that in most cases, the body's immune system defeats an HPV infection before it creates warts. When warts do appear, or if they do appear, they vary in appearance depending on what kind of HPV is involved. Okay, and remember, anything that's in blue, I hope you can see this. So, this is in blue. Okay. Is just for interest only, and you do not have to learn it. So genital HPV, in other words, sexual HPV, is the most commonly transmitted, common sexually transmitted disease in the USA. And there is no cure for it. As I said, mostly the body just gets rid of it on its own, but there are no medications against it or for it. More than half of sexually active men and women are infected with HPV at some point during their lives and just never know that. Fortunately, many cases are overcome by the immune system of the body, and some patients are never aware of the fact that they have the infection. Again, this is in blue. So how to reduce the chances of contracting HPV? Again, limit the number of sexual partners, as it can reduce the risk of HPV infection. Circumcision has been shown to be an effective means by which the risk of infection can be reduced in men. And then obviously using male or female condoms during sexual intercourse reduces the transmission of HPV. Okay, now this one's in purple, and purple is not something you've normally had before. So it is for interest, not to be learned, but it's important to know. So there is a vaccine available to prevent the human papillomavirus types that cause most of the cervical cancers. So one of the issues about HPV in females is that it has been found that there's an extremely close link between a female getting HPV infections of the STI type, in other words, not one of the other 100 that doesn't cause infections in the genital areas. But it has been closely, it has been proven that a female who gets cervical cancer, and generally this is a cancer that develops later on in a female's life. So if a female becomes sexually active, say at the age of, 25, and they get infected with HPV at say, age 26, they're not going to get cervical cancer at that stage. But maybe 20 years later, that female might get cervical cancer. And that cervical cancer has been shown to be caused by the HPV that female got 20 years previously. So it's important to not get HPV because later on in life, a female could easily get cervical cancer as a result of that HPV that she got earlier on. And so there is a vaccine. In fact, there are now 2 different kinds of vaccine. Well, last time I researched it, there were 2 different kinds. There might be more now. So it's a vaccination that is available to prevent the human papillomavirus types that cause most of the cervical cancers, as well as some of the cancers of the anus and the vulva, which, remember, is the area around the opening of the vagina. Also cancers of the vagina and cancers of the oropharynx. That means the back of the throat, including the base of the tongue and the tonsils. And this vaccine also prevents the HPV types that cause most of the genital warts. So the CDC, which I hope you know, oh, look what I've done. I haven't included the whole word here. It's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And it is the go-to place to find information on health issues. So the CDC, it's in the United States, now recommends that all 11 to 12-year-olds, males and females, receive the HPV vaccine. Now, I think that in South Africa it's now done for all females, and I think that it's done at school. But the CDC also says that all males should get this vaccination as well. And there are lots of very good arguments for everybody getting this thing. Okay, Ewan, it's in blue. Okay, HPV and cervical cancer. So nearly all cervical cancers are caused by HPV infections, although cervical cancer may take 20 years or longer to develop after an HPV infection. The HPV infection and early cervical cancer don't cause notable symptoms. And this is the problem with cervical cancer. By the time it is noticed, it will often have spread quite far. And so it is better to prevent than to try and cure. So getting vaccinated against HPV infection provides the best possible protection from cervical cancer. Right, syphilis. Syphilis is a highly contagious, in other words, it's easily spread, sexually transmitted infection. It's caused by a particular bacterium called Treponema pallidum. Now, remember, it's in blue, and therefore you don't have to learn it. However, let's remind you that it is a two-word name, and therefore it is a scientific name. Treponema being the genus name, and it's written with a capital T. Pallidum being the species name, and it is written with a lowercase p. Together, it is the scientific name. If I gave you this in a text and I said to you, write the genus name of the organism that causes syphilis, you would write Treponema. Because it's a scientific name, you underline it. Now, if I said to you, write the genus name and you write Treponema pallidum, you would get naught, because that means you don't know which is the genus and which is the species. So this is the genus, and this is the species. And remember that if you write a scientific name, you have to underline it. Okay. So the first stage begins with the person getting one or more sores called cankers. They are usually small painless ulcers on the genitals, or on the anus, or on the rectum, or in and around the mouth. And the sores from syphilis can occur anywhere in the body. Okay. They normally appear between 10 and 90 days, although on average about 3 weeks after exposure to the bacterium. Even without treatment, these initial sores heal without a scar within about 6 weeks. But the problem is it doesn't mean that the person is cured. They keep this infection in the body forever if they are not treated. If they're treated at this primary stage, this initial stage, the treatment will actually cure the individual and prevent the disease from moving on to the next stage, or secondary syphilis. So fortunately, if caught early enough, syphilis is easily treated with antibiotics. However, and this is the scary thing, antibiotic-resistant strains of this bacterium, Treponema pallidum, are beginning to appear. Some of the other scary things about it is if a pregnant woman has syphilis, she can pass it on to her baby. And syphilis infection in a newborn can be fatal. In other words, the baby can die. And that's why it's important for all pregnant women to be treated for syphilis. So here, down at the bottom, this is the bacterium seen under an electron microscope. It's a little funny spiral-shaped bacterium. So that's an electron microscope. These are some of the sores that can occur as a result of a syphilis infection. So you can see that it's not always on the genitals. It could be on a different part of the body. Like this is obviously on the hand, and then that is on the tongue. Okay. In blue. So secondary stage of syphilis. This stage begins 6 weeks to 6 months after the initial exposure to the bacterium. People with a secondary syphilis, in other words, at the secondary stage, may also have the side sores, different rashes on other parts of their body other than the sexual organs. Again, in blue, tertiary syphilis. If the infection isn't treated, it can move on to a stage marked by severe problems. It affects the heart, the brain, and the nerves. And it could result in paralysis, in blindness, in deafness, or dementia. And it can even be deadly. Okay, so that's the end of syphilis. Okay. Second one caused by a bacterium. This is gonorrhea. So gonorrhea is a disease caused by a bacterium transmitted during sexual activity. Okay. In blue, this next point, the bacterium can grow and multiply easily in warm, moist areas of the reproductive tract, including the cervix, the uterus, and the fallopian tubes in women, and in the urethra in both men and women. And then it can also grow in the mouth, the throat, the eyes, and the anus. This is in red, and that means it's terribly important. So some people who have gonorrhea show no symptoms at all. They're still able to transmit the bacterium to an uninfected individual. And that's quite scary. All right, so the infection can spread to various parts of the body. An infected person may develop something called pelvic inflammatory disease. And pelvic inflammatory disease leads to lifelong abdominal pain. So a person who has pelvic inflammatory disease, it can't actually be cured. And it just means for the rest of their life, one of the symptoms they're going to show is pain in the abdomen. And people with PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, may become infertile. They might never ever have babies. And then if the baby is exposed to the bacterium during the birth process, in other words, the mother's infected with gonorrhea and she gives birth to a child, then that child can be born with an eye infection that can lead to blindness. So let's have a look here. No, you're all going to look at this one, so we might as well look at this one first. So this is a gonorrheal infection that has spread to the eye. Okay. And this is a micrograph of the bacterium that causes gonorrhea. Okay. All right. Genital herpes. Genital herpes is a sexually transmitted infection caused by a virus. It's not the same kind of herpes virus that causes fever blisters or cold sores on the lips. Most individuals who have genital herpes show no or only minimal signs or symptoms. And when the signs do occur, they typically appear as one or more painful blisters on or around the genitals or the rectum. The blisters break and they leave little painful, tender sores that may take 2 to 4 weeks to heal the first time they appear. Typically then, another outbreak can occur a few weeks or a few months after the first, but it is usually less severe. It's normally shorter than the first outbreak. And this is the issue. The infection can stay in the body indefinitely. There's no way of curing it. So this is an electron micrograph of the herpes virus. Okay, so there you see the virus there, and there's another virus there. Okay, and then this would be a sign of genital herpes infection. So this is an outbreak, the funny little blisters that occur. So as I said, the blisters will then burst, and they will result in a little tender sore, and then they'll go away, and then they'll stay away until the next outbreak occurs. Okay, all right, so that's enough for today's lesson. We'll carry on next time.